welcome to the session, which you'll see is called Fourth Generation Universities, Shaping the Future of Innovation and Impact. My name's Nick Fowler. I'm Chief Academic Officer of Elsevier. I'm going to be the host of this illustrious panel this afternoon. We have with us Alexandr Hobza, who's Chief Economist of the Director General of Research and Innovation at the European Commission. We have Marianna Prokopi, who's an assistant professor at the University of Cyprus and an entrepreneur, also a winner of the Female Science Talents Awards last night. Congratulations.
All right.
We have Peter Schlosser, who's the vice president at Arizona State University, and we have Robert Jan Smits, the president of Technical University Eindhoven. Now, we're going to hear from each of our panelists in just a few minutes' time. But before we hear from them, a number of you may not have heard of this term, fourth generation universities. I certainly hadn't until Robert Jan and I had a conversation early last year. And now I hear it all over the place. And so I just want to take a few minutes to give a little bit of context, because it's in the title of our session, to make sure that we have a common understanding in the room of what we mean by fourth generation universities. We'll then hear from each panelist. I will host a Q&A discussion. Hopefully we can hear some questions from the audience, and then I'll close by asking each of the panelists to give a very succinct statement about the next wall to fall related to this topic. So with that, let's go to a very short number of slides about fourth generation universities. Well, do you recognize the person on the right there? That's the man standing on stage, Robert Jan Smits. Early last year, I had a meeting with Robert Jan, and we were talking about the way in which universities are measured, and particularly university rankings. And if I can paraphrase Robert Jan, he'll correct me if I get him wrong. He said, I don't like these rankings. They don't measure what we're actually trying to do. They talk about many things, but what we're trying to do essentially is drive economic growth in our region, solve societal challenges. We're trying to be a fourth generation university. And here you can see some of the attributes of a fourth generation university. What I often say is the first 1,000 years of a university's history is really about educating students. Then about 150 years ago, universities added the research dimension. About 50 years ago, they added the strong impetus to commercialize that research. And then the fourth generation is really about having universities being ecosystem orchestrators, so working not as independent entities, but as embedded in their localities, working closely with corporations and with industry to serve the public, to drive economic growth, create jobs, and solve societal challenges. So we then set about working on a project to identify, well, what are the indicators of a fourth generation university? And you can see here on screen from the report that we produced a number of indicators, some related to education. So it's not simply how many students have you educated, it's how many of those students have you educated, and then in very specific fields that are strategically important to your country, and how many of those students have stayed locally in jobs to create economic growth. In terms of research, how much are you doing with industry? In terms of commercialization, how many spin-outs are there? In terms of the governance of the ecosystem, what are the indicators that show you are embedded and working closely with your partners rather than working independently? So we launched this report also in Germany, in Bremen, earlier this year in March. And you can see here a panel where Robert Jan and myself presented the report together with Nicole Savacek, who I saw earlier, from the TU9 in Germany, and also representatives from the European Commission, and CESAR, the network of 50 or so European universities. And in short, it was very well received. There was a sense of we're hitting the right moment at the right time. Universities are under pressure. They're being scrutinized for their role in society. And this somehow provides a way for them to refresh their narrative and say, this is what we're here to do. We are agents of economic growth and solving challenges. So we continue to socialize at a number of different events around Europe and continue to get very positive feedback. And today is another opportunity to do that. Very last slide here, just to show what's at stake. Well, Robert Jan will talk about this, I'm sure, and we'll hear from other examples. But Technical University Eindhoven is part of the Brainport region, which got 2.4 billion euros from the Dutch government investing in things like photonics, together with investing in local companies like ASML. That's the kind of thing that's at stake if you can tell the story better about the role of your university in your local region. So I'll let Robert-Jan and the rest of our panelists elaborate on this. So with that, that's my introduction. I'm now going to ask each of my panelists, if you'd like to learn more or get the report, it's free. You can just download it here. I'm going to turn to my panelists. I'm going to first ask Robert-Jan, since I've been talking so much about you, I'll give you the chance to correct the record of anything I may have said. I'll then hand to Peter, I'll then hand to Marianna, and then Alexandr. So off you go, Robert-Jan. Floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Nick, for the introduction. I think you said it all, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm indeed the president of the Eindhoven University of Technology. We are located in the center of the Netherlands in the high-tech region. And we decided a couple of years ago to go back to our roots, to more than ever before be a driver of the development of our region, to be an agent of transformation, to work together in the triple helix structure with the local government, with the companies, but also with the citizens, to reach out to our city and to make clear that we as university are there for them. This is something which had been enormously appreciated, I think, not only just in the region, it also been appreciated at national level, and it gets on a lot of, I think, visibility globally, also thanks to the work of Elsevier, with whom we are developing some metrics. So we want to be, as university, very much in society. We want to be there with society, for society. In our case, it's very much the region. I see other universities who take more a thematic approach, that they say we want to have, a key role as driver of transformation in a certain scientific discipline. For us, it's very, very much the regional dimension where we want to play the role. And I think more than ever before, and you mentioned already, Nick, this is important to show as universities what is our promise to society, because that's what it's all about. What is our promise to society? And there's a lot of countries in Europe, but not just in Europe, across the globe, where the science budget is under pressure, where budget cuts are taking place. Take my own country, the Netherlands, big-time budget cuts at the moment. And I think it's not only something which universities have to protest about, of course, which we do, but also to think once again, have we not lost connection with society, and how can we reinforce connection with society? And we are doing that as fourth generation university, as driver of change, as driver of transformation in our region, reaching out to the citizen, reaching out to the local industry, and making clear that we are there for them. And that we are succeeding in that, I can give you a small anecdote, that people feel that we as university are getting out of our silo. We were last year, once again, a world champion on robotics football, and that's quite fascinating for those of you who don't know it. These are football teams, student teams, who have robots from all over the world, and they play against each other. And what is even more fascinating, 10,000 of people get together when there's a final, and then to cheer their robots. We were world champion once again this year, and again 10,000 people were there. We beat a Chinese team, which I think is quite amazing that Europe still has a lot of talent in the field of robotics. And by the way, they are not from the sideline manipulated. They have to think themselves how to outsmart the opponent. I took, when this was announced that we were, say, world champion once again, I took a taxi to go to the university, and the taxi driver said to me, we are again world champion. We. He did not say you. He did not say the university, he said we. And then I thought, this is indeed the role I want to play for my region. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Peter, staying with the university perspective, but moving around the globe to Arizona, please give us your perspective on this topic to get the discussion started.
Thank you. Yeah, it's already clear that I'm not speaking with a European background, although I got my education in Germany, but moved early on in my career to the US, where I spent most of my time. So we are not talking about generations of universities, we are talking about waves. So we are talking about the fifth wave of university, where the fifth wave is beyond research into a public service university. The reason for that is that if we are looking at the world, we are living in a world where we have created for ourselves a lot of pressure points. A lot of pressure points, a lot is being talked about climate, but there are other issues. There is water, there is energy transformation, food systems, societal dynamics, etc. So we are at a time where a lot of innovation, knowledge is needed to chart pathways forward that get us from a strictly non-sustainable pathway into one that leaves options for the next generations to shape lives according to their desires, rather than being saddled with all the problems that we leave behind for them. In situations like that, universities actually have to rethink where they are sitting in society. In my view, we have a mandate from society to provide the knowledge that society needs to move safely into the future. Now the question is, did we actually follow that mandate in the past? And in my view, the answer is clearly no. We have not adjusted to the world in which we operate. We are too slow. We are too traditional. We are moving along disciplines that cannot solve the complex interconnected problems that are all, in essence, complex systems based. And we are not moving as part of society. We are seen as boundary organizations in different regions to a higher degree. Europe is actually blessed compared to the US, but still, even in Europe, there are signs of sort of erosion of that trust into universities. So we have to actually get back that trust. We have to collaborate more or interact, engage with society in a much more direct way. We have to give them the feeling that we are not just operating in our own space and hope that we are doing the right thing and then preach to them. Co-creation is an overused word, but there is something to it. We have to actually have a discussion about which information is needed to make the critical decisions that have to be made on the ground. What is our role in that? Do we actually know what knowledge is needed? In order to do that, we have to rethink how we operate. So at Arizona State University, which is a university that has been ranked 10 years in a row as #1 in innovation in the US, also since the Times Higher Education rankings and I'm not giving too much on rankings, but they tell you a little bit, since Times Higher Education rankings on impact have been established, we are #1 in impact and #1 in sustainability. So the way we have tackled that problem was to create what is called the Global Futures Laboratory, which in essence is a prototype of a new university for the future of the planet embedded into a large university to be nucleated and grown. And what we are doing there is really trying to tackle themes in a transdisciplinary fashion rather than going by disciplines and try to get these disciplines to work together, which is really hard for these complex problems. In order to be successful, we have to make sure that we are not just operating on the research space, on the education space. We have to have a solution space that informs how we do our research. We have to network. But importantly, as I already mentioned, the engagement space is one of the key parameters of these structures. We have to really get more innovative, not just on the technological side. That's what a lot of people think when they think about innovation. It's technology. I think what we need more at this point than technology innovation is innovation in the areas of social sciences to understand how decisions are being made, and innovation in how to communicate incomplete knowledge with the appropriate caveats. We also have to change the way we train young people. We have to give them the chance to think broadly early on. We cannot send them through narrowly defined 100-year-old disciplines and hope that when they are done with that their mind opens all of a sudden. So that is something where we, in the next step, then we also have to actually let them be part of the development of curricula. And there are ways to do that because they need to understand where their agency is. And in essence, final point I will make, and then it could go on, we also have to combine knowledge systems. We cannot think that the academic knowledge system will solve the problems of the world. There are knowledge systems out there, especially indigenous knowledge systems. There are knowledge systems that come from society as a whole, private sector, etc. So we have to be much more cognizant of that and bring it in, open up, and in essence, become part of society again. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So we've heard two university leader perspectives, albeit from different geographies. We're now going to come back to Europe. We're going to go to the warm and sunny Mediterranean. We're going to go to Cyprus. And we're going to hear from Marianna, who's bringing in the perspective of startups and innovation. So you've worked both, and still do, with universities, but you bridge that divide because you're also an entrepreneur. So please, what's your perspective on this topic?
Thank you for the invitation, first of all. I am by training a researcher, molecular biologist, very traditional background. For many years I worked in universities in London and in Germany, in Hanover Medical School. I moved to Cyprus, far south of Europe, in the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The situation there was a bit more difficult, especially when I returned in 2010, when we had the financial crisis. We had two main universities, not a lot of a technological ecosystem. So we worked a lot with the universities on how to improve the innovation setup. We worked a lot because my background is in oncology with clinics and patient associations. And around 2016, we took the decision to go into the private sector and open up our first startups. The startup ecosystem now in Cyprus is flourish. We have around 700 startups. However, we have a lot of difficulty innovating in the biotech ecosystem. As a young scientist, I want to have a lot of support from the main universities. However, the ways of doing things were a little bit more traditional, more slow. Because I had a lot of passion for oncology. I lost my sister and my dad from cancer. I thought that maybe I have to move a little bit faster and create solutions for the people in need. So private sector was the one for us. However, the past 5 years, we worked a lot for the local community. We have created projects that we combine the clinics, the universities, patient association, carers of the patients. So we created a very nice model that we create compassionate science. So the science that cares for the people, the science that you produce products through the startups and you, gain into the financial means of the local country, but the international market as well. So when they invited me for this panel for the fourth generation university, it's something that really talks personally to me, talks in my heart. The universities are the providers of the knowledge. They are the silos and the hubs of innovation. So a university that works for their people and, engulfs the needs of the startups, the industry is something that we really need. So traditional universities, they have, to change a little bit. They have to hear the needs of the community to become an internal part of the community and, the financials of the community. We, as, let's say, the new generation of start-uppers, we're working for the community, with the community, and we want to be part of the university. So I think that that's not only the future, it's the present as well. So, yeah, we're here. We are here to help.
Thank you very much. Wonderful, wonderful. I love that phrase, compassionate science. So log that. Last but certainly not least, Alexandr. So we've heard from universities, we've heard from universities bridging entrepreneurship and corporations. You bring the government perspective, so the floor is yours. Please tell us what your perspective is on this topic.
Okay, I'll try to bring rather analytical perspective. Right? As a chief economist, my task is to analyze, crunch data, and try to understand what's happening in our innovation systems. And those of you who might have read recently the Draghi report, which was looking at the competitiveness performance of Europe, you will see that one of the key elements which Professor Draghi pinpointed that we have to deal with is innovation gap. Right? In Europe, we are not really exploiting our innovation capacity, our ecosystems, innovation ecosystems, are not as big or as developed as those perhaps in the US. They're not as well connected as they could or should be. They're very much localized and concentrated in some parts of Europe, whereas others are kind of lagging. And also, they are very specific in terms of their technological direction. So we're really relying on the kind of so-called old industries and then missing out on the new ones. So essentially, if we want to deal with this, we have to take system perspective. Right? This is not about like supporting this specific agent, that specific agent, but we have to make sure that we develop these ecosystems. And how to do this? Because if we're supporting innovation, what will most likely happen is it will be localized in certain parts. Right? We have seen this, and it's kind of a natural aspect of innovation. You need proximity of different actors to work together, and this starts growing. But at the same time, we don't really want these inequalities between different parts of Europe to grow. So you want to do it also in an inclusive manner as possible. How to do this? I mean, we essentially need then actors which are localized, but at the same time are connected with other parts, are able, I mean, if you're a researcher, if you're an inventor, you want to work with those who are, if you're the best, you want to work with those others who are the best. We try to look at the networks of cooperations in Europe, and then what we see is that in Europe, they're less kind of interconnected than, for example, in the US. Right? We have a lot of cooperations locally. That's something to be expected. We have a bit of cooperations regionally within countries, but the moment you hit the border, then the cooperations are much weaker. Right? So we did some computations, and then there you see that cooperations in the US are 2.5 times more intensive than those in Europe. And if you, because in US you have these two poles, like Eastern and then Western coast, so we try to compare Massachusetts, California with Germany and France, the biggest or most innovative countries in Europe. And there you see that in the US, cooperations are 30% higher than between Berlin and Paris. So we have quite some scope for improvement on that side. Right? Now, how to do this? I mean, is there some silver bullet? Well, probably not. But if you think, and then here, this is the connection to the concept of universities, fourth generation universities. This is not just some sort of fashion wave, but the local linkage or anchoring of universities, while still being able to source knowledge globally, I think it is very important. And they can become, and we already see that this is happening, in a number of local ecosystem hubs, universities are the center point. Right? And in here, I'm not talking only about like the big, well-known universities. You can think just of technical universities in specific regions. They are really main actors of the innovation ecosystem there. They're also, helping, with spin-offs, startups. They're helping to develop the whole ecosystem. And there is also some research which actually says that universities which have such local connections, they also are more successful in impacting, innovation more globally. Because through these local links, they're developing things which are needed in the markets, which private sector wants, and like this, they're spreading the results of their work more broadly. So from this point of view, I think universities of the fourth generation, they're also very much relevant for the global discussions on how we can close the innovation gap. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much. So now we've heard from each of the panelists, I'm going to ask a few questions, and I encourage panelists like the fourth generation university ecosystem to bounce off each other, right? So don't feel it's just answer me, go back to me, answer a different one, come back to me. Let's see if we can get a discussion among ourselves going. I'd like to pick up on this theme of geography. It's clearly core to the idea of fourth generation universities. So this idea, and you said, Marianna, compassionate science and serving the community, listening to the community. That word community matters. And Robert Jan, you emphasized the Brainport region. And we've heard some sentiment saying, fourth generation, is it only about local? Do you not care about global? Now, Alexandr, you gave a fantastic position there, but I'd love to hear from the others. Like, how do you think about local impact, working in a local ecosystem, but also having broader impact? Is there a contradiction, or is it a false contradiction?
Not at all. I think what is good for our region is good for Europe and good for the world. Take, for instance, the hydrogen economy we need to move to. You need electrolyzers. I mean, we have an industry which is making these electrolyzers locally. But at the same time, it helps the planet to move to a new form of energy. So the fact that you are very much operating in a regional setting, like in our case, does not mean that you don't have networks from all over the world, that you do not cooperate with counterparts all over the world, that you don't have students and staff from all over the world, but you focus very much, in our case, on your innovation ecosystem. You're indeed passionate about serving the society. And again, the things that come out are good not just for the region, are not good for the Netherlands, are good for Europe and for the world. So there should not be that distinction between the local, say, focus or regional focus and then serving at the same time, of course, the planet as a whole, because we have only one planet we need to take care of. Yeah.
Thank you. Those lectures, one, yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, that distinction between local and global is not, for us, not really helpful. There are problems. I mean, if you look at global problems, they're typically the aggregation of local action. And the impact of global problems are felt on local scales. Yeah. So they are intimately linked. And depending on what you are looking at, you start either at the global level and make sure that you transfer it to the local, or you start at the local and regional and see how much it matters globally and where can it be translated to. So I would not make that distinction. We are sitting, Phoenix is the hottest city in the US. We are sitting in an area, the southwest of the US, that is in a mega drought since a quarter of a century. So naturally, we have to look at these problems. But they are also, you could come from that from a local, you also could come from a global perspective saying, globally we are seeing more extremes. Just look at world map and look at where the extremes are popping up, and they are everywhere now. So we do understand that there are these two sides, but we are actually very agnostic of it. We are looking at which problems do we have to solve, and then we act either on, it's a sliding scale from local to global, and depending on what we are doing, we are entering either on the global side or on the local side.
What will the new government in the United States, the president, expect from your universities?
You stole my question, but go on.
That is a good question. I mean, we had big flips in the government, in the administration in the US, and we have another one. We know a little bit what to expect because it's written up in the report 2025. Some of you might be familiar with that, 2,500 pages on what this government will do. We also know what they did before, this time probably in a more refined manner. So we are bracing ourselves to see what the impact will be on the support of science. We do know that there is an intent to remove the Environmental Protection Agency, to remove the Ministry of Education, among other things. We might get a bit of a setback in the funding of hydrogen hubs, carbon hubs. The Chips and Science Act might be rolled back. So we are looking at that with some trepidation. At the same time, one aspect that had helped us before is that compared to Europe, the philanthropic landscape is much better developed. So in some instances where it is really a matter of how to innovate, how to move at the edge, philanthropy jumps in and at least lessens the impact. So yeah, interesting times. We are bracing ourselves, but we also are prepared to reorient from simply relying on funding from the government.
Yeah. Let me bring actually Alexandr into that. So you've started your remarks with the focus on the Draghi report of European competitiveness developments this week. Do you have a perspective on what that might mean for European competitiveness, or too early to say?
It's still too early to say. I must say I was involved in the preparation of the report, so I was lucky enough to be helping Professor. So of course I'm following this rather closely, and so far so good. I mean, we've seen many reports. Well, at least I've seen many reports in my career in Brussels, most of which disappear after 2, 3, 4 weeks. Right, they're shelved and very good ideas, but no real follow-up. Now, and I was checking the Google trends. Draghi is still trending, right? And whichever meeting I go to, Draghi report is invoked at least several times. So it seems it has traction, which I think is a good starting point. And in comparative terms, I think it has a lot of traction. Now, of course, the question is to what extent all of these proposals will be picked up by the European Commission, but also by the governments, and that we still have to see. I mean, as you know now, there are the new commissioners designate. They're being questioned in the European Parliament, and if everything goes smoothly, the new Commission might be in place in December. So that will be the crunch time. Then we will see to what extent, these policies will be taken up and pushed. I think promising signals are there. The President of the Commission, von der Leyen, she has already translated a number of suggestions in the mandates of the individual commissioners, and I think there is a clear determination to put.
But Alexandr, I would go beyond governments at European level, national. I think in the Draghi report there's a lot of also recommendations for universities. I think that all actors in the system have to think what from the Draghi report they can take along. Draghi is very clear about the fact that 1/3 of the patents which are filed by universities is only used or deployed. That means 70% is not used or deployed. I mean, this is a clear message to universities how to deal with their patent portfolio. So in other words, I think not only governments at European level, but at national level, I think all actors, including, of course, local municipalities, but also universities in particular, have to look into the report and see what they can bring in order to make sure that we have a change.
Exactly. Full agreement with that. But obviously, since we're talking about systemic change, policy needs to lead. And there are a number of measures which we have been trying to implement for years and so far have not succeeded. So let's hope that this will be like a little push that will manage to get us over and succeed.
Just a very quick one on this one here, on this question. I'm completely convinced that if we don't have change from within the university, then these external forces will not carry. So we have to be ready to move so that we can take advantage of what might come out of this report.
So I want to bring Marianna back in and see what lessons we might learn from Cyprus. You said some very interesting remarks in your opening remarks. You talked about the impact of the economic crisis and how that led to a consolidation of universities in Cyprus. That almost portends what we're now seeing. A lot of pressure on universities. It's why the fourth generation university narrative resonates, because it's giving a positive way forward for universities to say, we're not just cost centers, we're not threats to your immigration policy, we actually have a role to play in society. Are there things we can learn from the Cyprus experience of how universities have reset themselves in the face of crisis?
The past 10 years, I mean, the Cypriot universities were very, very traditional in the way that they were working. We still don't have a legislation for spin-offs, by the way. We're still working on the legislation. So for the past 10 years, there was a huge push to bring innovation out of the universities and in the universities. There was a creation of many, many startups. Now we have 1 million of population and we have 700 startups at the moment in Cyprus. We brought a lot of tech outsourced, so we have created tax incentives so we can bring big corporations in Cyprus, and we also have an IP box, which is a 2.5% tax on every IP-related technology. So for the past 10 years, we see that the universities open up their doors. Before, we didn't even apply for a service or do an experiment externally in the university, but now there is a service provision. We started industrial projects with them. The Cypriot Research Promotion Foundation created, for Cyprus, they invested 150 million. It's quite a lot of money for us to create co-developed projects. So a project that has to do a startup and a university at the same time, the same project. They have created PhD in industry, so you have to do at least half of the PhDs in the countries. They have to become parts of the industry. Now we see that there is, finally, we do have some patents granted for the past year, that for the past 5 years, there was nothing coming out of Cyprus. So I think in the innovation index, we are now number 10. So it was quite a lot of improvement for the local community. But I want to go back to the point that for me, because we are part of the oncology research, as a scientist, I found a gap between the lab, the clinic, and the community. So scientists, we are stuck in the lab, doing whatever project we might have in our hands. The doctors see the patients, but the scientists, they don't have access to the patients. So what we're trying to do now in Cyprus, we try to be part of the patient associations. We are embedded in the hospitals, so we have a very nice cycle. So we see the problem as scientists, we try to develop the tools for the doctors to use. So even though it's a very small community, we listen from the needs of the patients and we apply these tools internationally. So we take Cyprus as an example. Now we start having collaborations mainly with the UK. We work a lot with Stanford University and Korea. So from a small country and for very intense problems financially, within the past 10 years, we found some ways of improve and bring the universities closer to the community.
It's a cultural change you were able to establish, because I remember the European Commission did a very interesting survey amongst the scientific community. They asked the scientists, universities, do you think that the citizen should be more involved, should be more, know about what you're doing in your labs? And 90% said, of course, the citizen should be much more aware what's going on. And the second question was, do you think the citizen should be involved in agenda setting? And then 90% said no. In other words, the citizen can peek through the kitchen window inside the lab, but is not allowed to enter. And I'm not saying that the citizens should set the agenda for everything, but I think opening up, opening the doors, listening to your local environment is essential to get your credibility. And certainly now in the hard times which many universities are facing, it's not just in the Netherlands where we the budget cuts. You'll see them also in other countries coming. United States may be a nice, a bad example as well, what's coming your way. So, open up the doors, join indeed the effort of the fourth generation university to be drivers of transformation in your region, in your sector, in your country.
But it goes two ways. It's not just that, we also have to see what problems are existing outside. It's not just that we need the look from the outside to see how we are changing. Yeah. We really have to understand what are the pressures on society, on individuals, on nations, on global society, so that we understand how our change should be driven so that we optimize the impact. Because a lot of what we try to do is actually to change from curiosity-driven research only to that plus a new domain that is impact-oriented. And that, would argue, is needed, that second part, having impact on where the world is heading, is needed more than ever before. Because we are seeing challenges from all sides, but we also know that we have more knowledge to address these challenges and create opportunities than society is picking up. And somebody said, the patterns reflect that. So there is something that's missing in that interaction, and that's why I said we need innovation in exchange, in communication, so that we get a better embedding and benefit from knowing what those who have to make the critical decision really want to see and what they know, what they need to know.
So the clock is ticking. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to shift gears now and invite, I see hands shooting up already. You know what I'm going to say. Questions from the audience. So I saw the lady down here in the front row, if you can ask your question. If you could just introduce yourself in one line and then pose your question succinctly.
Balzhana Razbayeva, Manager Strategic Initiatives, EOIAN. We had a pleasure to showcase your report, which I read with great interest, and that is actually the question that I wanted to address. So, obviously it's very difficult to capture that impact that universities create, especially for the massive organizations as they are. So my question, I guess first, how did you go about capturing that impact? And I'm sure Elsevier was a great help, but how can other universities also do the same thing? And maybe as a follow-up to that, how can we bring more universities into that fourth generation movement, fifth wave movement, How can we, stop looking at those very traditional metrics and actually look at what matters? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest that So there are a few hands went up. To try and maximize the number of questions we hear from the audience, I'll just invite one panelist. Maybe I can invite Robert-Jan to take that question, because I think it's very much directed at the metrics that we develop.
Well, as a matter of fact, the report which we did together with Elsevier from Eindhoven is just, the beginning of developing new metrics, but also work on a narrative. And we invite everyone to join us in this exercise. We have said we take, Nick already mentioned that we have organized a number of workshops already across Europe to talk about this concept. And each time we get new ideas, so we'll continue developing it, and we hope to consolidate it towards January. Then we say, okay, this is now the concept of the fourth generation university. So join in, and it's a very exciting process because it also forces you once again to think about your role as agents of transformation and stepping away from just doing incremental changes to go really to big transformative research activities. So it helps also the fact to join in this discussion helps already yourself to reflect over your role and your future role at university. So an open invitation to all of you.
Thank you.
You're going to be busy, Nick.
We had a question here, right here on the front row, and then we'll go back over here.
Yeah, thanks very much. 3 comments about this systemic notion. I mean, I think
So can you introduce yourself?
Oh, Harold Schmidt from Maastricht University. So regarding this systemic, I mean, universities also have to realize that 2/3 of their graduates are vocational, more or less. So medicine, pharmacy, law, business. So there's not much room, to think of systemic. That's sort of a job. And Dutch universities are basically paid by the government based on their graduates in bachelor, master, and PhDs. So the other thing is this appraisal of the US system. I've worked at Northwestern University, at Monash University in Australia, German, and the Dutch. So in the US, hardly any position is tenured. I mean, no European academic would accept that, the harsh criteria, how academics are selected in the US, and the amount of adjunct staff and so forth. So we have to be really realistic with what we compare. And plus, I have heard very little self-criticism of universities. So for every academic, universities have 1 administrative staff. So I would really appreciate that universities are a little bit more self-critical about the amount of administrative staff they are sort of recruiting. It's like a tumor.
Thank you. Let me invite Peter to having.
So I hope.
Overheads, Peter, overheads. The famous overhead.
I hope it came across that I'm really critical of universities, that we are not doing what we should do, and that we are not advancing ourselves, restructuring ourselves according to the challenges of societies within which we live and who mandate us to exist, actually. I mean, some of the structures, yes, the universities in the US are not as tenured as European universities. There is more flex, but in my view that even has to increase moving forward. We need more practitioners among our faculties. We need more flux through our faculties. At the same time, we have to maintain a core of tenured faculty, which we do.
It's good to have flux.
Yeah,
I think it's a good thing.
right. And so I think I agree with you that we have to continue to be even more than we have been critical of how we have fortified our positions over hundreds of years and have grown out of equilibrium with the pace society is developing and the pace university is waking. So I think that is a clear recognition on our side.
Thank you for the question.
Just to add on this, I mean, what I was referring to was comparison in terms of intensity of collaborations. Of course, the way how universities operate is something completely different, and I would not argue that the Europeans should copy the US system. We have enough problems at home and specific problems which we need to look at and then try to solve.
Maybe they should. Maybe it makes them more dynamic.
We have another, but I think all the questions are coming from the front row, and not just that the front row is the only thing I can see with these lights.
Hi.
But
can you hear me?
perhaps our final question.
Yeah, I'm Shadi Neumann from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Karlsruhe. So thank you very much to all of you for the nice insights. I'm an innovation coach at our university, and we've heard a lot about we need to have the cultural change, and I'm totally in for it. I'm with the same opinion. And now we have people from universities today which already see that and are into all of this. And, you know, my question to you would be, do you have any tips for how to implement this cultural change within universities, and which points do we need to point out to convince maybe presidents or others at the university so we can have this movement together?
I think that's a perfect question for Marianna. As our innovator and entrepreneur, what's it take to incentivize people and get these presidents to hear?
Yes, I am a very bad example. I'm the black sheep of Cyprus because I chose to leave the university, unfortunately. For me, it was a very sad decision. I couldn't find my place there. I'm doing mainly research, but fast research in order to provide products for the people in need. I'm not in the mindset that I'm going to work on a patent for the next 20 years and I'm just going to, you know, be hidden in my lab doing research just for publications. So I am the black sheep. I'm not, what a chancellor or a vice president would like to see in a university. However, we work very closely with the universities now because the universities realize what we're trying to do in the private sector. So we have a lot of collaboration together. I mean, for us, it was really difficult to find personnel for our startups. So what we do, we train the students from the master's thesis. We do some internships together with Research Innovation Foundation during the summer. And most of them are part of our companies now. So even though in the start, there was a difficulty of understanding what we're trying to do in a very fast pace, now I think everybody loves the way that we're working. And I wish that I could have a position in the university and try to do the change from within. But yeah, things are changing now, so I'm happy to hear that we have a fourth generation or fifth wave of change in the universities.
Can I just add a very quick thing, a positive one?
15 seconds
yeah,
left,
15
seconds. We're almost out of time.
We really have to give young people more space so that these cases don't happen. And that is something that a lot of universities have a hard time with, but we have to open up.
Thank you. All right, so I'm under strict time guidelines. We're moving to the closing piece. So for each panelist, get ready, 30 seconds each or less. How can we tear down the wall between academia and society?
Start on the left side.
Okay.
It's not fair.
Give me time more to think. Well, you've written an entire report about it. So in 30 seconds or less, how can we tear down the wall between academia and society? Alexandr.
It's these notorious silos which we need to break. And I'm actually thinking that this is one of the occasions when people from different parts of the ecosystem come together. So I think it's great to see that there is a session on universities in an innovation-oriented summit. So I think this is a first kind of step. And we need many more of those. I mean, to universities to be exposed to the way how innovation system actually works and start thinking ahead. And then my second point would be to really think in a forward-looking way, what we often see, and this also links to policymakers. I mean, we're really captured in this short-termism, right? And then we have knowledge, we know what's coming our way, at least partially. We already have some solutions, but we really find it difficult to implement because this forward-looking thinking and action is missing.
Thank you. Slightly more than 30 seconds, but
sorry.
worth the extra time. How can we tear down the wall between academia and society?
Very simply for me, invest in quality of life for everybody. That's why the universities are there. They are the silos of knowledge, so quality of life for everyone.
Thank you. Very succinct. Peter.
Give young people more space, adjust what you do to what society needs.
Okay. And Robert Jan.
Well, bring common sense back into the system. That's what it's all about, you know. You're not there for yourself at the university, you're there for society. So really, common sense back into the system. And that's the case for many things. Promotion, career awards system in universities, Go for common sense, back to basics.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bring back common sense. Thank you, Robert Jan, Peter, Marianna, Alexandr.